I'm joined now by Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel magazine. And me and Eoghan were reminiscing. We met once during the pandemic in a green room in RTA, I think, or something, to discuss. You were discussing travel in the pandemic, and I was discussing some aspects of the science. It's good to meet you again.
Let's not dwell on the past, Luke.
No, but I got up this morning at 7:30 in the gloomy morning. Can't wait to go and see the sun, can I? You know, and let's face it, in people's minds now is travel in 2024, and there's many aspects, isn't there?
Absolutely. Happy sixth day of Christmas, by the way. I think it's goose laying day.
That's right. Is that what it is? Yeah.
I better check out my Frank Kelly before I go home.
Indeed, you better. Yeah.
It's a wet, miserable time, and this is a pattern that goes back since the invention of holidays. You know, from way back. That as soon as the wishbone is pulled, people start thinking, "Oh, it's gloomy, it's dark, the evenings are long." And where do we go? Traditionally, Luke, January was the biggest month for travel bookings. Legendary Aer Lingus sale. They would sell something like 30% of their entire stock for the year.
That's an amazing number. Yeah.
Budget travel, people will remember queues in the street. So it's still a big month. Things have sort of leavened out a bit because the way yield management, revenue, everything that goes with airlines, travel companies now. But January is still the big decision time. And luckily, we have tons of choice for summer of 2024.
Yeah. Right. There's new routes and all kinds of things, isn't there?
Yeah, not as many as we've had in previous years. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that the sad news for listeners and for consumers in general is that demand is going to outstrip supply. A couple of reasons for it. The aviation people and the travel people would like to get more seats back in the market, but there's a whole lot of hiccups on the supply side. Boeing's aircraft are not coming fast enough for Michael O'Leary. He's very cranky even when he's not in trouble with aircraft arriving late, but he's really cranky about this. He's saying he'll send some of them back if they're too late. I doubt if he'll do that. There's also an Airbus problem with Pratt & Whitney engines, which will reduce capacity across Europe. That means that we're paying a little bit more already than we were pre-pandemic. The average airfare for Ryanair, for instance, is about €10 more than it would be pre-pandemic. And we are going to run into that during the summer. The big question every year is in August, do I book, or every year in January, do I book now or do I wait till the summer and somebody gets caught with too many seats and they sell them off cheap late? I don't expect anything to be cheap late this year.
Is your advice then to book now? Or at least in January?
Keep an eye on those sales.
Yeah, the sales are really good. Yeah.
British Airways jumped first about 10 days before Christmas. Aer Lingus have a sale. Ryanair have their sale at the moment. The key with the sales is the terms and conditions. They generally have a book buy. January the 31st is a book buy for most of them. Some of them are January 14, 15. But the travel buy is the one that you really need to look at. Aer Lingus, Europe, very good fares for Europe. It's about the second week in June. And North America, end of May. Ryanair unusually have sale fares through the summer, right through to September. And British Airways right through to September. Emirates, Etihad, also keep an eye on those. What I noticed with and Qatar are going to have a third flight daily through Doha this summer. Right. What I noticed with those is that they tend to put Dubai or Bali and places like in, but they don't put Australia in because there's such a demand for Australia. It's very hard to get a cheap flight to Australia, but you're going to get one €1,200 each way, which isn't bad considering the way. And also think laterally, for instance, you can go with 2 stops instead of 1. Everybody likes to stop once in Abu Dhabi or Dubai or Doha. But you can go, let's say with China Southern, you can get maybe €300 cheaper, but it's a longer journey. And a very good eye on New York this year. We've a new carrier arriving in the New York market, JetBlue. They're going to run during the season to New York and Boston. Interestingly enough, Aer Lingus sale fares to Boston and New York are cheaper this year than they were at this stage last year. They're leading in at €179, which is really good value.
Wow, that's very cheap, isn't it? That's
very cheap. Yeah. It's again, your dates are not going to be your ideal dates for those sort of fares. The new routes in Europe, we've got 2 new Greek routes from Aer Lingus. A new one to Sicily. Sicily was being complicated in recent years. We used to have services to 3 airports in Sicily. Now we have back to 1, and Aer Lingus are opening another one this year. And also keep in mind, there are a couple of new routes which haven't been in the headline. Minneapolis, the big headline transatlantic route for 2024 is Denver. Aer Lingus going to Denver, beautiful state, Colorado.
Yep.
Colorado. They're going to Denver for the first time. They're going back to Minneapolis, and of course, Delta are also flying to Minneapolis, which is quite interesting. From nothing last year, we have 2 different carriers. Where you're going to get the best rates, Luke, is where you have 2 carriers competing.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you get 3, it's even better. But 2 carriers competing, and New York is a good example of what's happening with this.
Well, Delta came in, and that's what struck me as interesting. Delta suddenly were in Ireland, offering flights to New York and Boston and so on, and it is cheaper overall than Aer Lingus. It strikes me when I fly, anyway. You know,
it's not always.
Is it not?
The way the 3 we have 4 carriers from North America. 4 major carriers. Sorry, I'm going to go into the others now in a second. But the 3 biggies in North America, in the United States, are United, Delta, and American Airlines. They all have very extensive services, and all of them are doing Shannon as well, which is always important. Air Canada, pretty new in the market. By 10 years ago, we had a very basic service to Canada. Now we have Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, direct, all great. WestJet, Air Transit, all also flying to Canada. So Canada is going to have 3 carriers competing in Toronto. And Air Canada, by the way, the connections into North America are very often cheaper than the connections with an American airline. But, anywhere there's good competition between 2 or 3 carriers, that's where the prices will sort of...
Is one reason for the North America thing is you can clear immigration in Dublin? Is that attractive
one of the reasons,
to people?
certainly.
And many other, not many, at least to my knowledge, some come through Dublin on purpose to clear immigration there instead of having to do it on the other side of the Atlantic.
What that has done for Dublin is people have flown to Dublin from all over Europe, got a low-cost option, either come with the Aer Lingus feed service or got a low-cost option with Ryanair. Let's face it, Ryanair is our major low-cost. And then they can get reasonably cheap flights from Dublin as well, have the immigration done. You don't have the big queue at the other side. It's probably not as big a factor as we would think, because people, in my experience, will do anything to save €30. And then when they're stuck in the 3-hour queue in Miami, they'll say, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But price tends to guide people. The 2 things that are doing our transatlantic service, Luke, are geography. Our location gives us a lot of really good options for direct services, 16 of them from Aer Lingus into North America alone. And the second thing is that the technology of the aircraft is moving forward. Really exciting for aviation people is the fact that Aer Lingus is a launch customer. We've a really strong aviation history, but we're the launch customer for the A321LXO, which will be launching in around September. But in the old days, there was only the 747. Just talking to Barbara Scully out there about the old days in the 747. I
remember the 747.
Yeah, with the 330s and the 747s were really what you needed to get across the Atlantic. Now you can get much slimmer. Right. Instead of 280 seats, you only need to sell 180. That means a route like Minneapolis, like Hartford and Connecticut, which would never be viable, is now viable from Dublin. Yeah. And the other thing that makes it viable is, as you said, people fly into Dublin from all over Europe, pre-clearance and on their aircraft on. It's fantastic, the choice we have into North America.
I was amazed on the numbers. I'm assigned to looking at numbers. It's great. 2.25 million seats were sold by Aer Lingus for the US and Canada in 2023. Is everybody going to America? Setting that number of seats seems remarkable to me.
We're the 5th biggest of our North America routes out of European airports.
Right.
We have, if you look at one of the Saturdays last July, the only airline that had more transatlantic flights that day was British Airways than Aer Lingus. So Aer Lingus' entire business model, they've sort of pull back a little bit from Europe. They regard Europe now as their feeder for North America. They see North America as where the profits are to be made. And as I said, the technology
is allowing that.
Is allowing that. It wasn't. You couldn't really have sustained Seattle, to give it a good example, in the old days without, even though it's a wide body aircraft going to Seattle, it couldn't have been done without the feeder service into Dublin.
Right. And in terms of the overall economy of the airline industry, right, it is coming back, isn't it, to pre-pandemic levels?
Absolutely.
Another number of there was a 31% rise in first and business class tickets were sold last year, apparently, right? Now that's got to be a good sign, hasn't it? Because they need those business class fares, the airlines, don't they?
And business class, what they noticed is that people buying business class. Normally, the likes of yourself wouldn't have to pay for your own business. I know you'd have someone else to pay
that's
for
right.
it. And you sit there
It's too
and you
expensive.
enjoy
The price differential is
but
massive.
people are actually paying for personal, let's say getting out to see the grandchildren in Australia had to wait 4 years for it. Am I going to sit back and see around 57? You'll get a business class fare to Australia, let's go the furthest, for €4,000.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's lovely, isn't it? To be sitting
it's
there,
really good.
Especially if it's a special trip or whatever. It makes it even more special.
The biggest screen in the sky. They all have different things going for the biggest screen in the sky is Emirates. Emirates is a big favourite of mine. And you obviously have all the lie flat Emirates on the A380, which you don't have to Dublin, but you have on the Sydney to Dubai, have a little bar in business class with where everybody gets their selfie taken. You'll see it in everyone's Facebook profile. But it's really
it makes the whole thing special.
Okay, but the important thing here is I first flew way back to Australia and paid £900 Irish for the return flight. Proportionately, compared with the average income back then, business class is cheaper now. So what's happened overall is airfares have drifted down, and what used to be the ordinary fare is now you can get business for that. Airlines also have a third category. JetBlue are very good at this, the new carrier, where you get an in-between, where a little bit more
seen that.
space.
And you don't get access to the lounge necessarily at the airport or whatever, but you do get a business class.
There are other ways around that. You can buy sort of your card to get a lounge. I'd recommend highly that you don't have to be always in business class to get a lounge. You can get it through priority pass, things like that. I recommend highly, as a person who braves hundreds of airports a year, that lounge access is the difference between the airport experience being
miserable
grim and that's manageable.
So it's worth paying a bit extra, do you think, for those sorts of things?
And the differential between economy and what they call the in-between class, which most of them call a premium economy, is a little bit lower than the differential between premium economy and business.
Yeah. Again, options are out there, aren't
Great options and good fares. Good ways of making that money work a little bit, go a bit further.
And I love the notion of new routes. That makes us excited. And Ryanair are flying to Morocco. Isn't that a great thing?
Ryanair's haven't loaded the last 10% of their inventory because of that delays in aircraft. They've thrown new routes. They put new routes into Cork as well. And I do expect maybe to get a surprise or two from Ryanair with new services.
Right.
They're also, let's not forget Belfast. We've 10 new routes. It's the airport with the most new routes for 2024.
Is it really?
Yeah. And there's probably more to come from Ryanair.
Is it cheaper to go up to Belfast then and fly out of Belfast?
No,
not necessarily.
Generally not. But the difference between Belfast and Dublin. Dublin has two competing airlines, Luke, the Ryanair and Aer Lingus. And what we've seen since the pandemic is Ryanair's share grown and Aer Lingus' share shrink.
Right.
Belfast has three. It's got Ryanair and it's got EasyJet and it's got Jet2. And you have Aer Lingus in Belfast City Airport as well. So it means that if you've got generally two competitors in a route would bring prices down a little bit, but when the third one arrives, that's when you really see the action. And New York is a good example. JetBlue, Aer Lingus and United. And Newark is the other great option for New York. One of the interesting things that has happened in the last year, by the way, is Chicago is as big as New York in air transit. That's the first time that's ever happened.
Okay.
Now, obviously, it was ahead of JFK, but if you throw Newark into the equation, it balances up things a little bit.
The other big story we must talk about is this cap on the number of passengers in Dublin Airport, 32 million a year. What do you make of that? And what's going to happen? Because that was a big bone of contention, wasn't it, for all kinds of reasons? Yeah?
Has to go. I mean, the planning process wasn't built for major pieces of infrastructure. It's built for people putting extensions and ribbon development and knocking down old castles. It's not, for something as big as the airport, for which the growth in the economy relies. The planning process is really, really badly built for that in terms of the speed, the delays in board planola. All of this should have been sorted about 5 years ago. We're looking at a cap that was introduced in 2007 when the numbers in Dublin Airport were probably more than 30% less than they are now. And while everybody says, okay, we can stop the number of flights and we can divert them to Shannon or Belfast or whatever. It doesn't. The way the airport is so inherently caught up in the economy that if you start degrowing the airport, you degrow the economy.
You're in trouble. Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
that's, we've heard a lot of very well platformed local residents saying our lives are made uncomfortable by the increased number of flights. Dublin Airport seem to have done everything right in the planning, because unlike Heathrow, they're not looking to buy land to build another runway. They got that runway built, they did it during the pandemic, everything. And then we can come in with a regulation which means that we are to have fewer flights than we had before the runway was built. We got to get somebody to sign an order like we did, let's say, with data processing centres or something like that, and say, let's stop arguing about the cap. We passed the cap, by the way, in 2019.
Did we?
Not a word about it.
Not a word about it, yeah.
2023, a lot of arguing about it. Dublin Airport they're going to come in at 34.1 million for this year.
Anyway,
Now, Dublin Airport, as always, there's the argument about when somebody gets off a plane and gets on another one, they're double counted. Dublin Airport will say we're actually under the cap if you don't count that. But that's the international norm, is to double count. And we've got to get someone just to sign a paper saying, stop arguing about this. The airport has to grow.
Get on with it.
We have it's going to be growing about 5-6% a year.
Anyway.
And we can't suddenly tell all these major people that we're getting foreign direct investments. We can't start telling tourists, don't come to Ireland. We can't tell Irish people, don't travel abroad on business trips or leisure.
Right.
We have to somebody has to step in and say,
grasp the nettle.
And Fingal can make it. The economy in Fingal is bigger than the economy of the 6 counties in Northern Ireland, largely because they have an airport in their midst.
Exactly, yeah. Now, Owen, we have a question. It's like I asked the expert. Would Owen know of any new routes out of Shannon or any upcoming? It's such a lovely and easy airport to fly from. Do you know of any new routes?
A joy to travel from.
Yeah.
Ryanair very beholden to. Shannon are very beholden to Ryanair.
Right.
But luckily they have the Boston, Chicago, Boston and New York, and they've got Chicago back, which they hadn't for many years. They got that back from United. That was a big step. There aren't any new from Shannon this year, but as I say, Ryanair might put a few more back into the mix before the summer takes off.
Although I do see there's Cork to Rhodes. Isn't that right for Ryanair?
Yeah.
Like a fancy, a nice vacation. Rhodes is a beautiful place, isn't it, to go to?
Yeah.
And I imagine that's very cost effective, is it?
Okay, Ryanair's big growth was when they based the second winter aircraft in Shannon last year. So that's really what they're still they did well last year. Cork is where their extra routes have come in for this year, and there's one just started from Aer Lingus from Cork to Lyon. Last week.
Yeah.
So Cork have got I think 6 new routes for this year.
Right.
Shannon, Kerry, Knock. Shannon did well with the new routes in the last round.
Right.
Shannon has a lot of stuff that Cork would like as well. Direct services into Paris Charles de Gaulle. It's a very good airport, and as your caller said, an absolute dream.
Easy airport to fly out of, isn't it?
At the time, people were queuing to get into the terminal in Dublin Airport. I had the pleasure of flying out of Shannon.
That fateful day. Remember? That's right.
I had the pleasure of flying out and taking me about 6 minutes. You're actually wondering why I arrived so early because you're at the other side. You're always at the gate.
Very good. Owen, thank you very much.
Always a great
for all
pleasure.
your advice.